As we are now almost through the 2025 college football season, I wanted to talk about some teams that have had a major fall off this year. To qualify to be on this list, you would have had to have a good season last year, and either are going to miss a bowl game or have a chance at going below 500. I have come up with 9 schools that fit that criteria, and today we're going to talk about them. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about 9 teams that have fallen off in 2025. Alright, so the first school I want to talk about is the South Carolina Gamecocks. They were getting a ton of hype going into the 2025 season, and that was because of a very successful 2024 season. The Gamecocks were led by a couple of star players, and they got some key wins and had some close losses last year, and some argued they should have been in the playoff. Because of that, they ended up going into this season with a ton of hype, but unfortunately, it has fallen off. Besides their Week 1 win against Virginia Tech, it has been an extremely forgettable season for the Gamecocks. Their other 2 wins came against South Carolina State and Kentucky, and they ended up getting killed by Vanderbilt, lost a close one to Mizzou, lost to LSU, got blown out by Oklahoma, and then some of their last few games they've been haunted by mistakes. Against Bama, they were winning but had a late fumble. Against A&M, they were up 30-3 at halftime, and they were in the Ole Miss game at points but just could not figure it out. The Gamecocks are currently 3-7 with a 1-7 mark in the SEC, and to finish the year they'll play Coastal Carolina and Clemson. They should win the Coastal game, but I'm not sure, and then Clemson might be a toss-up. The game is at home, and at best, the Gamecocks can go 5-7. It has been a very forgettable year in Columbia, South Carolina, and some are wondering if Shane Beamer is actually the coach of the future, and if Lenora Sellers will even be around. The second school I want to talk about is the Boise State Broncos. Technically speaking, if they lose out, they could go under 500, but they're one of the better teams on this list. Last year, Boise State was obviously in the college football playoff, led by their star running back Ashton Jeanty. Looking to replace him this year, Boise State has not been able to find that answer, as they are currently 6-4 with a 4-2 record in the Mountain West. It started out with a blowout on the road against USF in Week 1, and while they did win 6 of their next 7 games, they are back on a losing streak. They got beat 30-7 by Fresno State at home, and then just most recently lost to San Diego State. Maddox Madsen is no longer the starting quarterback, they can't find a go-to running back, and things just haven't been as good. To finish the year, they play Colorado State and Utah State, and while I'd probably pick them to win both of those games, the Broncos are trending down, and for being the preseason Group of 5 playoff pick, they have really fallen off, and they're going to need to regroup and bounce back next year. For our third school, we're going to talk about the Washington State Cougars. Honestly, this was expected, as they got a new head coach in Jimmy Rogers from South Dakota State after Jake Dickert and Ben Arbuckle left for new jobs. John Mateer and a couple of other players also entered the portal, but surprisingly, the Cougars have actually been somewhat decent this year. They are currently 5-5, as they have wins over Idaho, San Diego State, which is a decent win, Colorado State, Toledo, and Louisiana Tech. Those aren't the greatest wins in the world, but they also only lost to Ole Miss by 3 points and Virginia by 2 points, and both of those teams can make the college football playoff. They had that ugly loss to Oregon State, got blown out by Washington, and got blown out by North Texas, but it seems that Washington State is up and down. One week they're competitive, and the next week they're awful. To finish the year, they'll play against James Madison, which is another playoff contender, and then they play Oregon State for the second time. I'm not sure how that happened, but Wazoo has a chance at getting redemption and getting to a bowl game, but if not, they could end up 5-7 and missing a bowl. With them being relegated from the Power 4, it's going to be hard for them to get back, but I have faith in Washington State and head coach Jimmy Rogers. After Washington State, we need to talk about the Florida Gators. Going into the season, Florida was expected to be one of the better teams in the SEC, as they started out ranked after they finished last year on a hot streak. Some thought that Billy Napier could save his job and get the Gators to the playoff this year, but that is not what has happened. After beating Long Island in Week 1, they lost 3 straight games to USF, LSU, and Miami, and the season was pretty much over at that point. While they somehow ended up knocking off number 9 Texas, it has been very difficult for them since then. They ended up losing to A&M, lost a close game to Georgia, and then ended up getting blown out by Kentucky. That game made no sense. They played it somewhat competitive against Ole Miss, and their lone other win in conference play came against Mississippi State, who's at the bottom of the conference. Currently, the Gators are 3-7 with a 2-5 mark in the conference, and at best, they'll go 5-7, but they would have to beat Tennessee and Florida State. They could possibly beat the Seminoles, but Florida's in the business of finding a new head coach, and I bet they're going to try to flip the roster and rebuild the program again. The biggest fall off in college football this year is potentially the Penn State Nittany Lions, who started out in the top 5 and probably won't end up making a bowl game. Going into the year, they returned Drew Aller, their top 2 running backs, and upgraded in the portal at the receiver spot. Unfortunately, that didn't change much, as after playing a cupcake schedule in Nevada, FIU, and Villanova, they got exposed in their first test against a top 10 Oregon team. Drew Aller threw a late pick, and they ended up losing that game, and it has sent them on a spiral. They then had one of the worst losses of the year against UCLA, lost by 1 point against Northwestern, and Aller was hurt for the season. They continued on with a 1-point loss to Iowa. They got beat pretty badly by Ohio State, and then after having a chance to upset number 2 Indiana, they blew it late and lost 27-24. They did get their first conference of the win last weekend against Michigan State, and to finish the year they have Nebraska and Rutgers. They have to win both of these games to make a bowl game, and I bet they go 1-1. I bet they beat Rutgers but lose to Nebraska, and they'd end up being a losing team because of that. I have no clue who Penn State is going to go out and hire, but I bet it won't be long until the Nittany Lions are back in the top 10 and competing for college football playoff spots. The next team on the list is the Sam Houston State Bearcats. They're one of the more interesting teams on this list, as in 2024, they ended up going 10-3 with a 6-2 mark in the conference. Unfortunately, their head coach Casey Keeler would end up going to Temple, and now Sam Houston is struggling immensely in 2025. New head coach Phil Longo is not helping out much, as the Bearcats are currently 2-8, but they are improving. They ended up starting the season 0-8 with an 0-5 mark in the conference, but in the last 2 weeks, they've somehow beat Oregon State and Delaware. They now have 2 wins, and maybe there is some hope on the horizon. And to finish the year, they play Middle Tennessee and Florida International, who are 2 of the worst teams in the country. So maybe somehow, some way, the Bearcats can finish with a 4-game winning streak and go 4-8. But still, after winning 10 games last year, it has been a major fall off for the recent FBS edition. Moving back over to the Big 12, we need to talk about the Colorado Buffaloes. Last year, the Buffs went 9-4 under Coach Prime, and it looked like he was starting to really build something in Boulder. Unfortunately, 2025 has not gone according to plan, as after losing in Week 1 to Georgia Tech, they have just not been the same football team. They ended up getting beat by Houston, and their lone 2 wins in the first stretch of the year came against Delaware and Wyoming. They started losing in conference play, as they've lost 5 of their last 6 games to BYU, TCU, Utah, Arizona, and West Virginia, and a lot of them haven't been that close. The lone good win of the year came against Iowa State, as they knocked off the number 22 Cyclones, and to finish the year, they play a top 25 Arizona State team, and then travel on the road to K-State. I think they go 0-2, and ultimately would finish with a 3-9 record and a 1-8 mark in the conference, which would be horrible. Coach Prime needs to figure things out and go back to the drawing board, or maybe he will be on the hot seat after the 2026 season. The Syracuse Orange were a surprise in college football last year under head coach Fran Brown, who is in year 1, but so far this season, they have not been the same. To be fair, they lost their quarterback, top 3 receivers, and starting running back, so things were never going to be the same, and then they also lost their starting quarterback midway through the season to an injury. After losing to Tennessee in Week 1, they would beat UConn, Colgate, and Clemson, and they were 3-1. They looked like they were going to have a decent season, but the losing has now started. They have dropped their last 6 games, and most of them have been blowouts. The closest game was a 31-18 loss to SMU, and things have just completely fallen apart. The quarterback position is a mess, the talent isn't there, and the momentum is just not on their side. To finish the year, they'll face off with number 9 Notre Dame and Boston College, and what's super intriguing is that Boston College game could be one of the best games of the year in the ACC against the 2 teams that are at the bottom. Ultimately, I do think Syracuse will win that game because it's at home, and that would mean a 4-8 record in year 2 for Fran Brown, but due to all the injuries, I think he'll be given a pass, and he will bounce back in 2026. For school number 9, we're going to talk about the Clemson Tigers, who also had national championship aspirations. I personally thought that they could get there, as they returned Cade Klubnik, some of the best receivers in the country, some incredible defensive linemen, and overall, they just had the talent. Unfortunately, we found out in Week 1 they weren't all that great, as they lost 17-10 at home against a top 10 LSU team, who's ultimately not that good. They also struggled against Troy in Week 2, and then after losses to Georgia Tech and Syracuse, the alarm bells were really going off. They have bounced back a bit, as they've won 4 of their last 6 games, but it's come against pretty bad competition. Florida State, North Carolina, and Boston College, plus 1 decent win over Louisville, which happened last Friday night. Currently, the Tigers are 5-5 with a 4-4 mark in the conference, and to finish the year, they have Furman and South Carolina. Without a doubt, they're probably going to beat Furman, and they should beat South Carolina, so that would put them at 7-5. But if they end up splitting those 2 games, there still is a chance that Dabo Swinney could have a losing season. I think Clemson will ultimately be fine though, and Dabo will find a way to bounce back. I know I originally said there was only going to be 9 teams, but I found another school that fits this category, and that is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Last season, the Razorbacks ended up going 7-6 with a bowl victory over Texas Tech, so technically they have had a fall off in 2025. I don't think many people thought they'd be good this year, but some thought they would take a step forward, as they blew out Alabama A&M and Arkansas State in Week 1 and Week 2. Taylor Green looked like he was finally figuring it out, but the losing has really started to add up. After losing to Ole Miss, they then blew it to 2 non-conference teams in Memphis and Notre Dame, and then have dropped 5 more SEC games in a row. The Razorbacks have been close, but have not been able to get over the hump, as they had a 3-point loss to A&M, a 3-point loss to Tennessee, a 3-point loss to Mississippi State, and a 1-point loss to LSU. Honestly, this Arkansas team isn't horrible, they just can't win. They are 2-8 with an 0-6 mark in the conference, and they still have to play Texas and Mizzou. I bet they lose the game against Texas, but as a Mizzou fan, I am for some reason concerned they're going to knock off my Tigers. I can't tell you why, but with the game being at home and them being 0-7, I just feel it has the perfect makings of an upset, and hopefully I'm wrong. Either way, Arkansas is going to move forward with a new head coach and hopefully some new players next year, and Taylor Green's talent was completely wasted. But yeah, what do you guys think? Which team had the biggest fall off in all of college football? Who else should have been on the list? And what topic should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.